Often, model building starts at the design stage. Create a concept and build on that idea. This is not one of these times. In fact, I started to build this model before I even knew what it was going to be. What was it going to become and how will it turn out? Keep watching to find out. Greetings fellow Earthlings and welcome back to Darlingbrough's Sci-Fi Builds. As I was sorting through my collection of paraphernalia used for model building, I discovered the shell from an old USB power bank. Instantly intrigued by the shape, I knew that I wanted to turn it into something, but I wasn't sure what to make from it. I was simultaneously trying to incorporate some of this collection of plastic lids into a build as well. I had literally hundreds of these small plastic lids, disposable pieces from medical devices, as well as a large collection of chilled fruit drink container lids, which had an interesting shape. It was when I realised that these items fit together perfectly that ideas started to flow. I first thought about combining these elements with the USB power bank and creating some kind of combat robot, with the lids being some kind of sensors or eyes. I decided that the lids from the fruit drinks containers were a little bit too long as they were. After carefully measuring them, I then carefully used my rotary tool to trim them down before sanding them and making everything nice and smooth. Once I had finished, I was happier with the shorter lids. I felt that they were more aesthetically pleasing, but if I'm honest, I still didn't have a clear picture as to how I was going to use them in a model. I took some time away from the camera and tried to develop some ideas for my model by seeing if I could become inspired by other YouTube channels in which they make science fiction based models.
What's up everyone, I am Sublight and today we're building a spaceship. That's right, I said we're building a spaceship because this bad boy right here, the Kestros class Picket Cruiser, was fully designed by me. As with all of the ships that I've designed myself, I'm going to make the templates and instructions available for purchase, which I'll have linked below in the description.
It was when I came across the channel Sublight that I was suddenly inspired to start playing around with Styrene. Styrene is a versatile plastic material and is usually available in the form of sheets or rods. Being lightweight, easy to cut, shape and glue, it's ideal for creating detailed models such as buildings, vehicles or landscapes, and has been a staple material for model builders due to its ease of use and low cost. Now I'll be honest, this is a material that I hadn't really used before, so I started to experiment to see what I could create. As I became more confident working with Styrene, I started to build more and more complex structures, which I then attached to the USB power bank, along with some random small pieces of sprues, beads and other random greeblies. Finally, the idea solidified in my mind to create a small spaceship. I discovered this cover from an old car charger and a small button in my collection. I felt that these could be combined to create a believable airlock door. Again, they fit together perfectly, but I wanted to use the details from the button on top. Carefully measuring the button, I checked the largest drill bit I had to see if I could drill a hole the correct diameter. Unfortunately, the drill bit was a little bit too thin. However, I expanded the diameter using my countersink drill bit to create a hole that was the right size. Starting with a thin drill bit, I carefully built up the hole to the correct diameter until it was almost large enough for the button to fit. I then finished the job using my rotary tool. Perfect. I built up the hinge mechanism using some plastic offcuts and styrene and then attached a completed airlock to the body of the ship. You'll notice that in the final airlock I also turned the button upside down to give the airlock more detail. And to finalise the piece, I added a piece of wire just to neaten up the joint. Even this far into the construction, I was still very much in a make it up as I go along frame of mind. I decided I really wanted to include some lighting, so drilled a hole in the airlock door to incorporate an LED. I created more details off camera with some more styrene to add to the ship, attaching them with CA glue. I then carefully started to add random extra details over the body of the ship to give more visual interest to the model. I also discovered the side piece to the power bank as well and reimagined it as a window, adding a Lego steering wheel and a couple of wires to add more detail. After several hours of randomly gluing pieces of junk to a metal box, I was really happy with the results so far. It's amazing what makes you happy when you build models. I then decided to focus on the ends of the ship. I still had one end of the power bank, which clicked neatly into place, and I also discovered this piece, which I felt would make an excellent nose cone. The source of this piece I will explain a little bit later on in the video. I compared the piece I wanted to use as the nose of the ship to the body. Unfortunately, the piece didn't fit as it was too short. I considered my options and started to carefully measure the body of the ship and also the nose piece. If only there was a way I could somehow create a custom piece that could connect these pieces. I wonder. I turned my attention to Onshape, an online CAD and product development platform that can be used to create 3D models and parts for all sorts of engineering projects. Onshape is available to anybody, and you don't even need to pay for an account. In addition, you can also get started straight away. You don't even need a high-end computer, as everything is cloud-based. Now, for the record, Onshape is not sponsoring this video. The only reason I'm actually talking about Onshape is because it's the software that I used. Unlike other 3D design software such as Blender, which has a very high learning curve, Onshape is fairly intuitive. Plus there's loads of tutorials available online. Now I am far from a 3D modelling expert, but even I was able to use the tools to create the front section for my ship. Once the nose cone had been designed, I then went to my local hackspace, and with some help from Jan, thank you very much Jan, I 3D printed a piece which perfectly matched the body of the ship and smoothly translated to the piece I was going to use for the nose cone. It was then time to start gathering all of the electronic components that I would be using for putting the model together, including a couple of flickering candle tea lighters and a small switch. I began prepping the wires, making sure to save the wire offcuts for later, tinning the ends with solder, which would make soldering the components together a lot easier later on. Then it was time to disassemble the candle tea lighters, which was surprisingly easy. Once I gently popped the back off, all that remained was an LED and a small plastic piece, which was the switch. Although all I wanted from the tea lighters were the actual LEDs themselves, I was actually pleasantly surprised by the other pieces as well. Interesting shapes I will definitely be using in future projects. The reason I chose these particular tea lighters is because the LEDs actually flicker like a candle, which, I'll be honest, I thought would look ideal for some kind of ship's engines. Now, I don't know about you, but for me, seeing a model that includes some sort of lighting provokes an almost childlike wonder in me, and this first glance was no different. I was unashamedly and nerdishly excited about getting this model finished, painted, and fully illuminated. However, there was still a lot of features I wanted to add first. From small rivets to extra panels, I wanted to increase the level of detail. I used parts of a sprue and the switches from the tea lighters, which also helped disguise the lines where the USB power bank and the 3D printed part connected. The body and the nose capsule were really taking shape, and I was really looking forward to seeing it completed. Now that I had established what I wanted the bow of the spaceship to look like, it was time to give the vehicle some stern attention. You see what I did there? Stern? Stern is the back of a ship? Oh, never mind. Returning to the translucent lids I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I had the idea of utilising these as some kind of thruster for the vehicle. I trimmed them down to match the lids of the fruit drinks, and then drilled holes in the bottom of these lids, and I also drilled a couple of holes through the bottom of the USB power bank lid so that I could utilise them for the flickering LEDs from the candlelight tea holders. Whilst the body of the ship was fairly well detailed, I felt that the nose cone that I 3D printed needed some additional details to be added as well, and so turned my attention to that. I attached some sprues using some more CA glue, giving more realism to the model. More details were also added to the back of the model as well, using parts taken from the keyboard of an old broken laptop. It was then time to try and incorporate the small switch. Using my rotary cutter, I drilled a small hole so that I could install the switch, and then attempted to cover it up using a clear plastic panel. However, that idea failed miserably. The translucent plastic panel kept falling off, and I actually ended up ruining the switch with the superglue. Doubts started to settle into my mind about the course I should follow in order to complete building this model. I had no clear plan in place, and consequently I felt uncertainty creep in. I wasn't sure if I should combine the front section to the body or wait until after I had painted the model, or if I needed these sections separate to install the electronics. The question is, does this just affect me? If you are watching this and you're a model builder, do you go through any stages of doubt when building a model? Do you ever find yourself questioning your decisions? Perhaps overthinking things, or just procrastinating, simply because you're not quite sure what to do next? I would love to hear your feedback, so please leave all your comments down below and just let me know. Am I alone? In the end, I made the decision to attach the front of the ship and the body together. Unsurprisingly, nothing dramatic happened, and my fears and doubts dissipated fairly quickly. I also made the decision to repurpose the blue translucent plastic into another window so I could add an additional light to the model. In order to hide the gap between the parts, I added a wire around the seam, and this blended the parts together perfectly. I honestly don't know what I had been so worried about. After taking some time to tidy my workbench and gather all of the elements for the model together, I then decided now was the time to start priming, a stage I had been really looking forward to. Whilst the primer was drying, I started to focus on how I was going to power all of the lights, and I turned to an unusual source, an old disposable vape. Often vapes are created with interesting shapes which, when dismantled, can be used for model building. If you have a look at the front of the nose cone, that was part of a vape as well. Additionally, many vapes contain small batteries which can be salvaged and repurposed to power small electronic projects such as LED lights or mini microprocessor boards. Many vapes also have built-in rechargeable circuits, meaning these batteries can be connected to a mini USB or USB-C charger and reused. This particular vape also included a built-in display with a helpful battery meter. While I was keen to try and utilise this display, unfortunately this model wasn't designed with that in mind. Perhaps I can use a display like this in a future model. Who knows? Now, just as a quick disclaimer, I do not personally vape myself, nor am I promoting vaping on this channel. I have several friends who do vape, and they keep their disposable vapes for me, purely so that I can use them in my models. After dismantling the electronics from the vape, I then started to build the circuits for the LEDs. Now, I'll be honest, I'm just going to gloss over this because I cannot solder for toffee, plus also my soldering iron is absolutely terrible. Yes, I know, a bad workman blames his tools, but yeah, seriously, I've got some issues. With all that in mind, once I attached the switch, it was really nice to see all the lights turn on at the same time, and I was really enthusiastic to get them installed. My enthusiasm was fueled further because it was now time to start painting the model. The primer had now dried and the model looked absolutely amazing, but it was time to add some colour. I was once again unsure as to the colour scheme that I wanted to choose, so I spoke to my daughter, who suggested a blue and purple motif. I decided to try and apply some sort of gradient to the model, fading between the blue and the royal purple. In order to speed up the drying process, I used my dedicated hairdryer. Not only is it absolutely wonderful for helping to dry paint, but it actually doubles up as a useful tool to dry your hair. Ah, now I see. That's why it's called that. Makes sense now. Here's a handy hint for you. Hot glue sticks make excellent stands that you can use to hold parts of your model when painting them. Not only do they remove nice and cleanly, but they also give a satisfying snap. After carefully removing the masking tape that I'd used to protect the thrusters from being painted in the areas I didn't want them to be painted, I then turned to a steel colour and gently dry brushed this over the model, revealing some of the highlights. This made the model look as if some of the paint had wore away from the edges while it had been in use. Now, dry brushing is a very common technique for any kind of model painting, and if you are interested, I have actually put together a video on how you can improve your dry brushing using a dry brush palette. The link will be in the description below. Once all of the paint had dried, the final task was to install all of the electronics into the model. In order to control the lights, I installed a fresh switch on the other side of where I was originally planning on including it. This switch I felt was much better, and with the paint was fairly well disguised. I then started to install some windows into the model. For the windows, I chose to use some small offcuts of clear acrylic, and in order to create the diffusion, I gently sanded one side. As there was going to be no interior details visible from the outside, I felt that the frosted effect looked absolutely perfect and would still allow light to shine through from the interior LEDs. I fit the circuit board into the nose cone. Obviously, it fit absolutely perfectly because it was taken from the same source. I carefully installed the blue LED into the nose cone using a cool glue gun, as well as the other areas on the ship where the lights would show. Although only powered by some small individual LEDs, seeing the model light up really got me excited. I felt like a kid at Christmas. So I continued to forge forward and, using the cool glue gun, installed the lights into the model. Hot glue guns are hot. Despite my best efforts to try and keep everything nice and neat and tidy, the electronics inside the model soon became fairly cluttered. And I'm not gonna lie, off camera I ended up just shoving everything in. Considering all of the self-doubt that I went through, I must admit I thoroughly enjoyed building this model. Although not everything went to plan, not that I had a plan half the time, I am really proud of the final results. Now, full disclosure, I have not included all of the errors and mistakes that I've made making this model. Errors such as shorting out electronics, burning myself, shorting out LEDs, and quite a lot of errors when I was trying to paint the model. And it's not that I am trying to deceive you in any way or trying to make you think that I'm a better model maker than I really am, but this has been a bit of a learning experience for me. During the progress, I've tried using techniques that I am not particularly familiar with, and I've also tried to expand on the skills that I already do have and push them to the limit. And whilst I want to bring you along in my journey of discovery, I want to try and achieve a balance and show you actual progress being made. And I guess that what I wanted to achieve from this video and the channel in general is to maybe try and inspire you to have a go at building a model yourself. So with that in mind, if I have inspired you to maybe start sticking some things together and making a model, then please give me some support. Make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, perhaps make a small donation to my Buy Me a Coffee page, the link is down below, and check out these videos as well. In the meantime, hasta la vista, I'll be back.